Good morning from India, folks. Good evening in New York, and Paolo, who's in Italy, very close to Venice, in the middle of the night. So, uh, whatever salutation is given at 2:30 a.m. in Italy. My name is Aseem Chhabra. I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm the festival director of the New York Indian Film Festival. And I think many of you in the US know me because I've spent more than half my life there. I'm sitting in India, I've just woken up, and I'm having my chai. On behalf of Kalakars, the South Asian Film Institute, welcome. All of you know what Kalakar does, and I think it's remarkable how Giri and Vishesh and a few others have sort of taken this organization so far. Today we are going to discuss film festivals and submissions to film festivals, and this is the best group that I could put together, two of the leading lights as far as Indian cinema and film festival is concerned, and international cinema, of course. So we have with us Deepti. Deepti is in the same time zone as me. She's in Bombay, Mumbai, and wide awake. Deepti is, I'll briefly read, she's the South Asian correspondent for the Directors Fortnight at Cannes. Deepti does some amazing work with NFDC's Film Bazaar, where she is she heads the viewing room. I have to admit that, I mean, I've said that to her many times, but many of the films that I've been programming over the years for the New York Indian Film Festival initially emerged from Deepti. Really, some of the best Indian films that we know of that have been talked about at festivals and later and awards and came through Deepti, and she's the one who picked those films. So salute to Deepti again, and good morning.
Morning.
And Deepti is also the selection committee of Locarno Open Doors, and she's worked on several other international film festivals. She could probably give some examples of the journey that she's been through with Rome and Shanghai and elsewhere, and Pingyao in the recent years also. And then we have Paolo Bertolin, and if you people have traveled to any of the Indian film festivals, if you go to the Goa Film Bazaar, for instance, Paolo is always there. If you go to Mami, Paolo's out there. Paolo is he's the programming committee of the Venice Film Festival. And so, Paolo, I believe you look at other films also, not just Indian cinema, of course, right? And he's also in the selection committee of the Directors Fortnight at Cannes. He's a member of the European Film Academy, and he's also the member of the Asia Pacific Screen Awards ceremony. So, Paolo, thank you for staying awake for us. I really appreciate that. So, this is going to be a very free-flowing. I don't have any questions written. I was just looking at your bios, but. Before we go to specifics, I mean, I would love to hear from both of you. I know that, Paolo, you just finished Venice. And, Cannes, I don't know if you started calling for submissions yet or not, or probably they started coming. Deepti, I'm sure you're in the midst of finalizing the Film Bazaar, because the Film Bazaar this year is in January. What are your days and nights like? I mean, are you always watching films? Deepti, you can start first.
Well, yes, that's what I can say. It seems like I'm always watching films, and or I'm replying to emails, or I'm sourcing films, and this is something I've been doing for the past 10 years. But unlike Paolo, I am usually watching films only from India and South Asia, because I really can't make time for watching films outside as much as Paolo and Aseem you do. For me, what I do is really that I like to be the first point of sorting out, all the submissions that are getting, because the amount of films that are made in India are like incredible. I am still amazed at the passion for filmmaking and the number of languages we receive films from. I mean, I always say this, that every year I discover 2 or 3 languages that I never knew existed and is not listed anywhere. And I'm hearing it for the first time because it appears in some regional film. And, we have incredible talent in India. And I live in Mumbai, which is, and in Mumbai itself, I live in the hotbed of the film industry. So I do know how difficult it is for voices to emerge from smaller regions all around. And I think the work that I do at the viewing room essentially is create the infrastructure to allow for professionals. This is not an audience infrastructure, but so that professionals like Paolo, like you, and programmers from all around the world, VOD platform acquisition people, theater distributors, buyers, and also investors, are able to view these films and maybe put in some money to just complete the films or take the films to other parts of the world, because this is clearly not something that a one person can do. And I must say that since I'm on the call with Paolo, he's a long-time colleague, but the amount of visibility that he has been able to give the best Indian talent in Europe, which is so required for Indian art house cinema, because we don't have audiences here in India, is incredible. And yeah, Aseem, you too in America, to take the films right up to New York. Even we will often have conversation. I mean, suggested really what we would call small regional films to each other, saying that this is. So yes, that's what the days like, where in between all the films, some amount of eating happens and some chai happens. But yeah, but I'm not a film critic, so I don't directly I don't reach out to audiences in any form directly. I purely work as a professional, where I am selecting films for selection committees of festivals or for a market.
No, which is actually really, you're fortunate that you're so focused. My mind is so cluttered because even when I'm not reviewing films, and I don't review very often, but being a films journalist, when I see something wonderful, maybe at the Film Bazaar or some of the other, I have such an urge to then go on Twitter and announce here is the new arrival. And I know that we cannot talk about the film until it's been shown at the festival or something like that. So I really have to shut up the journalist and ask the journalist in me to sort of sleep for a little while. Paolo, what are your days and nights like? You said you had a deadline for tomorrow. What's the deadline? Is it festival related?
Well, no, it's actually related to a fund. It's it's project evaluation. In fact, I was about to say that my experience, my daily or nightly routine is very much similar to Deepti's. I'm watching a lot of films. I am dealing with a lot of online correspondence, emails. And then, yeah, as many of us, I waste time on social networks. Actually, I'm glad I only have Facebook. I stuck to that because that has also become a channel of communication. People reaching out to you and trying to get in touch with you. By the way, footnote, I don't accept friendship requests from people who don't drop a line. I mean, if you want to know me, if you want to get in touch with me, please write me a line saying I am this and that, and I want to get in touch because of this, because I usually accept only people that I recognize, because I meet so many people around festivals that I have to also protect myself a little bit. Because this is yet another channel of communication, and answering emails, dealing with the filmmakers, the producers, the sales agents, and the whole constellation of people in the industry is eating up much of my time. And this means that I'm not watching the films, which should be my primary activity. And so there has to be a balance between the two things. And apart from that, yes, I'm also doing other festival or film industry related activities, which means, for instance, I'm called in some panels or juries where we evaluate projects. And this is a little bit similar to what Deepti does in terms of pre-selecting the films that she is presenting at Film Bazaar within the viewing room. It's doing this kind of job where you are assessing the quality of certain projects and seeing if they can receive funding. And this is what is going to keep me up throughout this all night, because I have to write reports about that. So as Deepti said, I feel like my life is completely absorbed by this work. And also, as we were saying, just right before we opened up the Zoom to the audience, I didn't feel that much the stress of the lockdown, because I'm someone who's spending a lot of time indoors, And my job is keeping me in my room, always in front of a screen. It sounds depressing. It is. In fact, when people tell me, oh, what a fantastic job you have, what a cool job. You know, I was doing a medical test the other day and the doctor asked me, oh, what do you do? And I started explaining what I'm doing. And she was like, wow. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I am here at the doctor exactly because of this job. You should realize that it's not as cool as you think. Of course, now we all know that we have the perks that of traveling. You know, we get to these film festivals, we get to these film industry events. But as Deepti knows very well, I've been attending Film Bazaar for almost 10 years, probably. And
Yes.
and you know, last year it was the first time I set foot in the pool. I mean, after all this, you know, Aseem as well, Film Bazaar, there is the fabulous pool by the sea there in this resort where the event takes place. But do believe me that when you're leading this life, sometimes you're skipping the fun side of these, you know, industry gatherings because you're so overwhelmed with the things you have to do. Because even the socializing, the networking, the attending the parties, by the way, I have to say that every time I attend a party, I am making violence against myself because I'm not that much of a party person at all. But all these activities, these side activities are part of the job. You know, like you're talking with people, you're meeting them, you're listening to their pitches, their projects, whatever they have in their pipeline during these events. And then you get updates from your colleagues in this conversation. So what is peculiar about the kind of job that we do is that we never stop. It's continuous. It's very difficult to disconnect. Also because we have the privilege of managing our own time, but then it is also the problem. And that is why I'm up here at 2:30 a.m. completely awake because even if I'm not traveling, I feel like in the past 2 weeks I've been jet lagged because I'm working at night and then waking up at strange hours, then going back to sleep again because, you know, while watching a film, I'm falling asleep and I say, okay, it's not fair, and I stop and I go to sleep, then I wake up again, start anew, or start from the point where I left. I mean, I'm being honest about this. The watching conditions of all of us sometimes are not the ideal ones because we're doing this job all the time. And let me add one thing, which Deepti is aware of. There is also this incredible stress due to the fact that you're dealing with the filmmakers and their expectations. And if you are filmmakers, you, the audience who are attending this webinar, let me tell you one thing, and it's not to be mean. You have your own film, you're working on your film, and we do understand how much that means to you. And we know that sometimes it's a lifetime process to come to that one film that you've been making for several years and it's been inside your brain and your heart for such a long time. But we, as Deepti clarified it, we are like a crossroad. We are the point where all these hundreds of films and hundreds of personal life stories behind the films are coming to. And it's not to be mean, it's not to be unfair, but inevitably we cannot deal with everyone in the same way. We cannot be, you know, nice and kind. I mean, I'm trying to be as kind as possible with everyone, but it's, you know, hundreds of people, hundreds of emails. Have you watched my film? Yes, but I mean, oh no, I haven't, because I'm replying to emails of filmmakers asking me to watch their films. So that's why I started to use this stratagem of clearly saying, please write back, please do it. Send me a reminder in 1 week, 10 days, 2 weeks, because if you send me an email every other day, then I will not be able to watch it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been a bit long-winded, but it was to give an idea of what we actually do and how our lives are affected by what we do.
This is good. When you refer to the pool at the Goa Film Bazaar, I can't swim, so I've never stepped into the pool. but I always make it a point at least one evening to sit by the pool. But when I go to Goa, which is I'm going to miss so much this year, I make sure that I go out eating in some of the fabulous restaurants.
I have another fabulous example of such kind. You know, one year I was in Busan, you know, the festival in South Korea, which also takes place by the sea, and it's a seaside city. And I took a picture of the beach from my hotel room, which that year had a view. So I took this picture and I posted it on Facebook, and people started asking me, "Oh, how is the water?" And I actually wrote, "I actually didn't step out. I didn't walk to the beach. I just took a picture."
So, you know, many of the people who are listening in right now, they are either writers, screenplay writers, or they're actors or the directors. That's what Kalakar is made up of South Asian origin, not necessarily from India itself. And they live in New York or outside New York, and mostly in US. They're all very curious to know what's the process, what does it take for their film to go through a film festival route. You know, I know Deepti gets hundreds of submissions of Indian films only, and I'm sure, Paolo, you also get directly Indian film submissions also. This year, for instance, Venice did something remarkable. We had an Indian film in the competition, The Disciple, after I think 19 years, which was really fantastic. And then Disciple also played at Toronto and New York Film Festival, which has never happened with an Indian film like that. And plus, Toronto also showed what was also my favorite milestone, not Toronto, Venice showed Mile Patthar, Meel Patthar milestone. What is the process? Usually, should people watch out for the submission deadlines? Does that ensure them that their film will get watched? How much can they bother you and say, "Have you watched my film? Have you watched your film?" Or you much rather they don't bother you at all? You both want to answer that?
Okay, I'll go first, Paolo, if you don't mind, because these are questions that they keep coming up, and I'm also in the process right now. So Paolo did mention about filmmakers writing in. One is, I want to clarify that I don't do it. I do Indian and South Asian films, and also we've been receiving a lot of submissions from filmmakers based in the US. Because at Film Bazaar we have I also run the Work in Progress Lab, and we've had a lot of films from US-based filmmakers. Ivan Iyer, Sony. When Ivan Iyer made Sony, he was based in the US at that time, and Indian matchmaking. Smriti Mundra, she had come to Film Bazaar with A Suitable Girl, which went through the lab, and Rahul Jain, who was a CalArts student, came with Machines, and we have someone called Ashish Pant. So we do get a lot of submissions from South Asian and Indian diaspora as well, from all over the world. And the idea is of the Film Bazaar is to highlight talent from India, South Asia, and Indian diaspora, to make it easier for programmers around the world to gain an entry. Because how do you start sourcing in a region like India, which produces like thousands of films a year, and in over 30 languages, and the diaspora spread across the world? So I think the first kind of filtering is what I do. And I think it's very important here to mention that, it's not bad to use Film Bazaar as a starting point. Don't directly necessarily always go into film markets. Film festivals. Film markets are an infrastructure that is built alongside many festivals to support basically the film festivals. Film festivals are a platform where a film has its first screening for the audience, which could be local or global, and for the press, but before the film comes to the screen, there are a lot of people involved in the journey of bringing that film into the screen. And usually it's very rare that a filmmaker can make a direct shortcut, which is that I've just made a film, I've submitted, and it's gone to the biggest festival in the world. That's how filmmakers think, that they are going to, it's almost like saying that you have been sitting at home and painting a painting, making a painting, And then once the painting is ready, you think you're going to be showing at the biggest art gallery. It doesn't work that way, right? There has to be there is a process. You have to and with independent films, what happens is that the reason they're called independent is precisely that it's a lonely journey. Most often the filmmaker is making the film without any contacts. They have not managed to plug into any industry yet. Hence, they had to raise the funds independently. And it's even more important for such filmmakers to actually experience markets, understand the ecosystem, know, what are the, because some of the mistakes are very basic, like for example, you mentioned some submission deadlines. Now you have a filmmaker who says, oh, the deadline for this, can is say 15th of March. So they will submit the film on 14th of March, just close to midnight. Now this is a classic mistake by Indians and South Asians for some reason. And I know that because I work with international film festivals, and the programming coordinators are so stressed out because it's just close to midnight and suddenly from our region, all the films are pouring in, So you have to realize that it's always good to go in with your film early. There are early bird deadlines, you save money, plus the programmer is able to watch your film early on. But having said that, please keep in mind that a programmer is not going to watch your film 5 times just because you're working on your cut 5 times, Make sure that when you're submitting a film, understand it's a selection process and you are competing. And sometimes it depends on the kind of festival. Sometimes you're competing with the local filmmakers, but sometimes you're competing with the best global filmmakers. If you think of it like a sport, it's like, you could say Cannes, Venice and all are like the Olympics of festivals, right? You have the best from around the world coming in, and you have to be really, you have to take it at that level. So you can't just send a cut which is very shoddy, the sound is not done, something. I mean, though we encourage rough cuts because you need world premieres, and premieres are another ball game altogether. But I would say that show the cut, you're showing your work, give it. So make sure that you are targeting the festivals depending on when you think your film is closest ready to be judged the way you would like it, so that you're not making 100 excuses on emails saying that, oh, please watch a 3-hour cut of my film, but I swear I will reach 1.5 hours in a month's time. No, if you want to send a 3-hour cut of your film, send it to a film market, to a lab. Don't send it directly to a festival. And I would say that second thing is that, read the form. You have to understand film festivals have very small teams behind them. It's not a huge corporation. The programming coordinator usually is 1 or 2 people, and they are looking at thousands of submissions. So don't be lazy and not read the rules and regulations. Don't ask silly questions, I mean, they're not going to be replied to, because questions will always be replied to in priority of what you are asking and not if something is on the website. And also be patient. Don't expect an answer immediately. This is not an SMS or WhatsApp. You're talking to a professional. I think at some point people confuse networking with this is a classic example. I will get an email from a filmmaker after 9 years of me having watched that filmmaker's film or met that filmmaker, but it'll be a very pally email and say, hey Deepti, can I send you a link maybe of my film on WhatsApp? And I'm like, no, why would you do that? I mean, there is a submission procedure. Please submit your film. And I understand that, everyone wants to save on fee waivers, but do give it a thought that where do these fees go? Fees go precisely in making the festival happen, and you cannot weaken the foundation of that. So we are usually put in a spot where we are made to feel guilty if we are not giving fee waivers, when actually it's a policy decision by a festival. Like, for example, the festivals that I work for in China had a policy that you don't need to take fees from India. They were like, they understood. I was able to explain to them that the independent filmmaking scene is very different from the rest of the world, and filmmakers might not even have money to complete their films. So so they gave a blanket, okay, fee waiver. But there are some festivals that cannot, like Directors Fortnight in Cannes. I mean, you have top professionals working as programmers. You have a very expensive place where this festival takes place. The kind of visibility your film is going to get if it comes there is the business is going to boom like anything. So why are you asking for a fee waiver? So do understand that I can work for different festivals. I can give you fee waivers for some and not for some. So I'd say you can ask politely, try your luck, but don't feel bad if you're saying no. Keep your submission materials ready. Always submit at least a month before the deadline, and respect the fact that once you have submitted, you're in a selection process, which basically means that you cannot ask. I don't know, but Paolo is a very, very kind programmer who's very generous with his time, and he really handholds filmmakers. But for me, I've really taken that stand where I'm like, I'm sorry, but my feedback is not for you. My feedback is for the festival director of the film. And you have to understand that, because I work across film festivals, and your film might not be appropriate for Cannes, but it might just be appropriate for Mami, or it might be appropriate for Chicago South Asian Film Festival. But if I give you a blanket feedback on your film, what the filmmaker is listening to is, oh, Deepti liked my film, or oh, Deepti didn't like my film. And that is not the point. The point is that we are comparing and selecting, right? So I might love your film, but the honest truth is there might be just some amazing films from maybe Bangladesh or Nepal, and it's going to be, or there might be a great film from China, and there might be certain slots, few slots. Like if you see Director's Fortnight has very few slots as compared to, say, if you're programming for Toronto. So you might not be able to make it there, but just because your film didn't get programmed doesn't mean I didn't like your film. And just because I gave you feedback about, saying certain things, doesn't mean I'm not going to, recommend it to a certain selection committee. So which is why I, as a rule, have stopped giving feedback, because I've realized that a lot of filmmakers, and I understand it's a very sensitive place for filmmakers because they've made the film, and just we are usually the first viewers of the film,
yes,
because we're watching the films in the rough cut. And a lot of them are like, oh, if you like my film, you're a good programmer, and if you don't like my film, you're a bad programmer. And it becomes about that, it's never, it's our scope is much. So I would say that we are not the ones to give you feedback. You really want feedback on your film, make that effort, go to a market, show your films around, ask other people, don't think of programmer can fix your film. We are not mentors, there are labs, and we can have these conversations, but don't push us to have the conversation, because honestly, if your film is really not up to the mark, we are also, we have to keep confidentiality about other films. We can't divulge that, oh, but it's good, but it's not good enough, as good as the film of this other filmmaker that we've seen who has more chances. No, we cannot say such things. And when you say, why is my film not or bad or not working, no one's saying your film is bad, but it's very tough to break it down into certain aspects, and if we do not want to communicate that, I don't think it's, you have to make the film and get advice from people who are not in the selection process of the festival you're applying for, so that there's no conflict of interest, but don't push a programmer for feedback. And one last point before you can move to Paolo, because I'm sure he'll have a lot to say, is, a lot of people submit films through Vimeo links. And there is some kind of an idea that Vimeo link gives you some background data status of how much film has been watched. And then you get all these anguished calls that I submitted my film and only 15 minutes of the film was watched. No one watched my film. I paid the fees and, my film. First of all, your films always are watched because we have jobs to hold on to, right? I mean, imagine you have submitted your film to Cannes, and I don't know why you assume that, I'm having a great life, not watching films. So the programmer didn't watch the film or was bored and didn't watch the film. And the film lands up in Venice. Who is answerable? I'm answerable as the programmer. That how is it? Because immediately the festival director will go and say, oh, did the film submit to Cannes? What did the programmer write about the film? Why wasn't it in our festival? Why did it go direct? I cannot, I cannot take these chances, right? I have to identify. So we watch all the films that come in, but yes, it's not right to spy on the fact how much we are watching. So I think in the past, we used to always ask for DVDs. At that time, you would never know. It's like you're applying for submissions. I mean, any submission. Do you really have a relationship with the person who's selecting? Is that right? And to actually, so I feel that you should always give downloadable links to programmers so that we don't have to use plugins, so that you don't get the information of when we are watching the film. Like Paolo said, sometimes you watch the film and you might stop the film because you're tired, or you might think that I need to watch the film at a different time, and maybe you'll get back to it. But by then, the filmmaker's so anxious, anxiety has hit because of some Vimeo stat in the background saying 15 minutes, 10 minutes. And I'm telling you those stats. I know for a fact when the filmmaker finally challenges me and says, you have not watched my film, then I tell them the story of their film. And I say, okay, tell me, how did I know the story of the film if I've not watched it and nobody else has watched it? So don't get into this kind of a relationship with the programmer. It's not healthy. But apart from that, I think be professional, submit your film on time, and just wait for the results. And if you don't get into one festival, there are hundreds of festivals around the world, and you will get into some.
Paolo, before you step in, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things Deepti said. Since I've been running this Indian Film Festival now for, I think, 10 or 11 years, the deadline for submission is important, but what people don't realize is that, as Deepti said, if you submit your film earlier, we've been watching films long before. We don't sit, okay, March 14th is the deadline, okay, 15th we start to watch the films. We've been watching films much before. And in fact, it becomes harder for us to sometimes accept a film which comes to us exactly March 14, 15, because by which time we had already, we've already decided on some of the films. So that's, the earlier you submit, the better it is for you also. About watching the films, all festivals have a committee. Giri, who's here, is a part of the New York Indian Film Festival committee, knows that among the 5-6 of us, we make sure that every film gets watched. I cannot humanly sit and watch 200 films that are submitted to us, 250 sometimes, including the shorts. But as long as one person has seen it, 2 people have seen it, and they have not liked the film, I have to judge their taste. If they like something, I have to watch it myself also, because I also want to like it. That's very, very important. But the other thing is that people always ask for feedback, especially if you send them a rejection letter. I'm usually very kind. I do try and talk to some people because of the fact that, I become a journalist then at that point. But people also forget that, just because you receive a rejection letter doesn't mean that my job is finished. I have a month and a half then to organize the film festival. I cannot be picking up the phone or sending emails to people describing what is wrong with your film or why your film didn't work. So understand and be patient. And yes, as Deepti, as you said, there are many other festivals and there are many other ways people can get opinions about what is not working with their films. That people need to understand that, we are also human beings at the end of the day. We all like to encourage good talent. And it starts with you, Deepti, but I think that people need to understand that. Paolo, tell me your story. Tell us about the submission process for some of the festivals that you worked on, deadlines and issues like that. And you can go beyond Indian films also.
Well, actually, Deepti has been so clear and precise that I have little to offer more than what she said, and I'm quite impressed, because I always keep saying that I always keep blaming the fact, my lack of organization, to the fact that I'm a Gemini, but Deepti is also Gemini, so that doesn't work here. So yeah, well, anyway, what can I add? I think one point that Deepti made at the very beginning is something that I really would like to stress a little bit more. The fact that these days our job as programmers has expanded beyond the sheer fact that we are watching the films that we receive. Now the festivals, especially the most important festivals, cannot just sit down and wait for the films to fall from a tree, exactly because of that kind of stiff competition that we have with one another. We are friends, but then again, yes, we need to make sure that the prestige, the status of the event that we are working with stays the same. And if we start missing on great films, then yeah, that prestige is being questioned. In that sense, we are increasingly involved and asked to attend these industry events where projects are being pitched, where work in progress versions of upcoming films are being presented, and the filmmakers involved with these projects can have the opportunity to give visibility to their upcoming films. And I think this notion of visibility is quite important, even beyond what is the statutory mission of these events. Because yes, of course, you go to a co-production market to reach, to reach out to potential partners, co-producers, sales agents, funds, but then actually you're already placing your project on the map. And people like me, sometimes we start getting involved with someone, with filmmakers, with a project, with a film to be at that stage. And I think one of the most inspiring examples, and it's the one that I always mention, it's connected to Film Bazaar, is connected to The Disciple, because the first time I met Chaitanya Tamhane and his producer, Vivek Gomber, was exactly at Film Bazaar, when their first feature film, Court, was just a project. It was not a film. It was nothing. It was just a pitch. And we met at the co-production market of Film Bazaar maybe 1 or 1.5 years before they managed to complete the film. And we conversed and talked, and I felt there was something interesting. Sometimes it's just a matter of feeling, oh, this guy has a vision. This guy knows what he's talking about. He's done his research on the specific topic on what he's working. He seems like to be someone very thorough. Please send me the link to your short film, because it just happened that Chaitanya had screened his short film at Rotterdam International Film Festival. I hadn't seen it, so I said, give me the opportunity to discover it. And then maybe 1.5 years later, I received out of the blue this email. Hi, this is Chaitanya. I met you at Film Bazaar. I finally finished my film. And by the way, this is also an interesting story in regard to what I was saying earlier, the fact that sometimes we are tired and we need to find the right conditions to watch the films. I remember very well, I was here at home, because here I'm at my parents' now. I'm stuck in Italy at my parents'. And when I received the Court, I was here. I was there on that couch over there. I was sitting there, and I was on my laptop. So I said, let's start. And I started the film, and I remember that, oh, this is very interesting, but it's a bit long. I'm falling asleep. I have to stop. I'm not in the right condition to watch this film. And then I don't remember when exactly, if I was still on that couch a few hours later or the next day. I found a moment when I was wide awake, and I said, okay, let's watch it. And then I watched it, and I thought, oh, actually, no, it's not long. Everything in the edit of this film makes sense. I know that film, I mean, Chaitanya told me that many people gave him the feedback that, oh, maybe it's too long. It has this and that could go. But me personally, when I watched it, I thought, no, I know you will get this kind of criticism, but I see what you've done here, and I can see that everything makes sense. So it is very much related also to chance, because I guess that if a filmmaker with his or her first feature film writes out of the blue to a programmer that he or she doesn't know, maybe the chances would be different. The dynamics of what I just described might happen differently. But going back to the point, I would like to say and stress again how much it is important for you to plan things ahead. It's easier when you're already in the industry. It's more difficult when you're a total newcomer and you're at loss understanding the complexity of this world, because as many other industries, even within the so-called art house sector and the festival circuit, things are getting more and more complicated, which creates a little bit of a barrier for the newcomers. But don't feel too frustrated about it, and just try and see how it works. I think the example of this webinar shows that there are also opportunities of access, getting to know how things work is now easier than it was before. Because can you imagine the time when internet was not there and people were submitting films to festivals at the other side of the world without having access to the regulations, maybe having to pick up a phone or send a fax? Do you remember faxes? I mean, I'm old enough to remember what a fax was. So yeah, I mean, and also, you know, submission materials. Can you imagine how burdensome it was to send a subtitle VHS that you were making expressly for a festival submission, or a subtitle print? Again, I am old enough to remember that when I started working for Venice, we were working with 35mm prints. And when you, I mean, there was not Google Translate, but when you make a print, 35mm print with horrible subtitles, I mean, I remember we were giggling watching some films that were not dramas. I mean, so the times are actually more complicated, but actually much easier. There is an easiness of access to the information. Deepti mentioned the regulations. Yes, please read them. I mean, you spare us time. You know, when you ask me something, I'm overwhelmed with these hundreds and hundreds of emails. And when you ask me, oh, is my film eligible? I feel like, can't you just open the website and see if it's eligible? I mean, why do you have to ask me information that is obviously available somewhere? You're actually positioning yourself in a bad light. And in fact, I remember instead, on the contrary, again, another film bazaar incident. I was really surprised once I met this young newcomer producer. She knew everything. She knew all the regulations of Venice and Cannes. And I was like, wow, you're so great because you're sparing us so much hassle. I mean, I wish everybody was, you know, as serious-minded and precise as you, because we get so many frustrating questions. I mean, of course, I'm trying to be also a little bit more fun in what I'm saying, but and I'm exaggerating things. We are there to answer those questions indeed, but when it comes to such basic aspects as eligibility, and yes, Deepti also mentioned this, please read those regulations, because it happens oftentimes, especially with Indian filmmakers, that you actually waste money applying to a festival where your film is not eligible. I give you the specific example of Venice. Venice is a festival where we only accept world premieres, meaning that your film is brand new. It hasn't been publicly shown anywhere, including your home country, including India, including your state in India. And then I don't know why, every year, at least a few films, especially from India, unfortunately, I have to say it, I open the database, I open our platform to watch films. Oh, but this Malayalam film has already, you know, the censorship certificate, the advertisement, you know, that you have, I mean, you know better than me, you know, they have this obligation of including these anti-smoking, anti-alcohol cautionary ads in the beginning of the films. And when I see those, I immediately go to IMDb, and yes, the film has been released 2 months prior in Kerala or in Tamil Nadu, whatever state. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not watching this because it's not eligible. And especially because you have to also understand, and this is something you were mentioning a moment ago, the work, the process, because oftentimes, and this also adds a little bit to what Deepti was saying, oftentimes, and actually most of the times, the decisions don't entirely rely on me or on Deepti. We are, especially in regard to India, we are the first filters for this festival. So yes, it's true that the decision of not showing a certain film to our colleagues of the committee is entirely on us. We take the responsibility or the blame for that. But then the next step, which is, okay, I see this film and think that it is worth showing to my colleagues, then I'm not responsible anymore. It's a collegial decision. And what happens is that usually, you know, I try to see all the submissions and I single out maybe a handful of films. I mean, this year, I think, I mean, besides, I mean, it was a very rich year for Indian cinema, and it's quite unfortunate and paradoxical that this incredible year for Indian cinema happened exactly when the pandemic was spreading and the festival circuit was so badly affected, because this somehow killed some opportunities for some of these films. And it's very frustrating because there are, Deepti knows, there are quite a few very interesting, powerful, visionary films out there from India that were not able to premiere yet. And they will have to wait and maybe compete with each other again and compete with more films ready in the coming months. So I'm very sorry that this very good year for Indian cinema happened within these circumstances. But what I wanted to say is that once you single out those 5 exceptional films, you show them to your colleagues, and your colleagues, as Deepti was mentioning, are the ones who are maybe watching films from Argentina, France, Germany, and they're putting them all on the same level. You are the ambassador, let's put it like this, of the Indian films, trying to explain why you chose them, why those films are relevant to you within context. Because sometimes, of course, I'm not as knowledgeable. I'm not Indian. I don't have the full Indian experience, the eyes to understand everything. So sometimes it's very enriching for me to speak with Deepti about Indian cinema, because she sees so many things that I cannot see. But in general, when I talk with an Iranian colleague and she tells me about the things that Iranians see within a film, that's very enriching and makes me understand what is there, the added value. And I think it's very important to have these people within the machinery of a festival. So I can do that. I do that more on the artistic side rather than the cultural aspects, which unfortunately, I have to admit it, I cannot fully analyze in a way like Deepti does. Sure. But then these other colleagues have to judge solely on the ground of, does this film make it within the larger scope of our program? Is it, you know, because you can understand that a film is relevant within context, but then that relevance within context has also to speak beyond the context. And if it doesn't, yeah, maybe it cannot make it to Venice or Cannes. Maybe it can make it to a South Asian festival where its relevance would be primary. But within, you know, the larger landscape of other international festivals, that's not enough. And that's why, you know, out of those 5 films that I pre-select, maybe 1 gets in. This year it was exceptional because Disciple was there in the main competition. And then, of course, Milestone was in Orizzonti, the second competition of Venice. I would like to add, there was also a short film, Anita, in the short film competition, which made it exceptional. I mean, this, again, it's a testament to this incredible year for Indian cinema, that there were 3 films selected in all the 3 main competitions. But it was lucky. It was lucky for me that this happened, because usually only 1 gets in, if ever. And then even those other 4 or 3 films that I regard as important, or even sometimes I feel like they are really, really special, I also come out of this with a broken heart, because I feel like it's a pity. But what can you do? It's part of this process. And Deepti explained it so well, that we are not there to be mean or to frustrate your dreams. It's just a harsh reality that applies to Indian filmmaker as well as to Vietnamese, Turkish, South African, Australian filmmakers.
So, you know, it's interesting what you mentioned, and Deepti also mentioned that both court, Chaitanya Tamahane's court, and Ivan's Sony originally came through the film bazaar, through the co-production market, and through I don't know if I don't think court was court was not in the work in progress lab, was it? No. But Sony was. Yeah, but it's a fascinating journey. From there, these films then land. Both of them ended up in Venice, and of course, their second films, I guess, it was an easier journey for them. But
Can I just
yeah,
something like Aseem, because it's
yeah.
very important, exactly because of the complexity that our so-called industry has reached. The existence of Film Bazaar is something extremely important within the landscape of the festival circuit, of the distribution circuit, because sales agents are also attending Film Bazaar. And if you look at the arc, like a narrative, if you look at the narrative of what has happened for Indian cinema in the last 30 years or so, it was exactly the lack of a connection of this kind of nexus that created the situation for which Indian cinema was absent from Venice competition for 19 years, and now absent from Cannes and Berlin competition for 25 years and counting. Before that, Indian cinema was one of the staples of these three festivals. Historically, it was one of the national cinemas that was always represented, and then suddenly it disappeared. There was a disconnect. India and South Asia in general were left behind within this evolution, within this development of the industry. The more the industry was going towards a direction where it was much more integrated and not fragmented, and people were speaking to each other and knowing each other across borders, and before films were being made, for some reason, the Indian industry, of course, we're not talking about Bollywood. We're talking about India.
Yes.
The Indian industry was a little bit behind that. And that is, unfortunately, this is a gap that still needs to be completely bridged. But I'm glad to say that we are living in a very exciting time for Indian and South Asian cinema, exactly because, of course, it takes time, because we are harvesting the fruits of what Film Bazaar has been sowing in the past 10 years or so. And I'm not someone who is being, very pretentious about, sending praise to someone. I don't have any, Deepti is not paying me basically to say this. I just really appreciate immensely what she and all the others were set in place on Bazaar, because I know how hard it is to create this kind of initiative. I know how hard it is for Deepti to watch those hundreds and hundreds of films to come up with their lineup. But I also know how much the people in the industry appreciate that. The people who are spending their days to come to Goa, not to stay by the pool, but to meet the filmmakers, but to spend their days in the viewing room, to continuously talk and meet with people and discover projects and talent. It's quite amazing, and I think one has to give credit of that. And if one just looks back at what, my job, my selection of films that have been presented in Venice, most of them, almost all of them, have some kind of Film Bazaar connection. So even if Disciple is not a Film Bazaar project, my connection with Chaitanya and Vivek spawned out of this meeting that we had a Film Bazaar 6-7 years ago.
Right, you're absolutely right.
Aseem, here, I'll just like to say one thing, since Paolo has been so generous about Film Bazaar, that I would like to tell all the viewers here of this webinar that this year Film Bazaar is online, and the registration fees are really low. And if it's not going to be, if you have a film, or if you're just curious, or you've never been to a market before and you want to have the first online experience of the market, then this is the right time to register. It might be difficult a little because you're in the US, but we're trying to work through time zones. But I think for a filmmaker, now that so many markets are going online, for a South Asian filmmaker, it would be a good place to begin, so you're not overwhelmed. and start your connection. So it's going to happen in January, and it's not too late to plan your days so that you're able to attend this online film market.
Yeah. So there was a question on the submission process. Somebody asked if you're still work in progress and the submission deadline is arrived, is it safe to submit? How far along should we be in the cut if we can submit? How important are film markets for filmmakers? Anyway, that's been answered. But how fine should the cut be for a submission?
Can I answer this question? Because this is something that happens all the time with Indian filmmakers. And it goes back to what Deepti was saying. It feels like sometimes people are fishing for feedback. And, oh, what if I send you my 3 hours cut? This is happening all the time, because I understand the situation that unfortunately Indian independent filmmakers don't have the kind of structures behind them that European or Latin American filmmakers have, starting with the fact that filmmakers in Europe or Australia or Brazil always work with a producer. And a producer, by the way, is not an investor. A producer is someone who is with you along, maybe you're working in US, so it's different, but people in South Asia in general and in other Asian contexts see an equation between the producer and the person who invests money in the film. Within the European context, and of course the American one as well, it is not the same. An investor may not be a producer, and a producer might have not actually shelved out any money from his or her pockets into the film. So it is important that we know that kind of situation, but at the same time, it's not the right way to proceed, because one has to understand that, yes, we can be very generous, we can take a look at a film, but we will only look at that film once. So if your wonderful 3 hours director's cut is not working, you have to understand that you won't have a chance. And by the way, I have become also a little bit strict about this. I'm asking people all the time, please register, because it's work for me. And my work is being paid through that festival. And if you ask me to watch a 3 hours cut, you're taking 3 hours of my time out of my work that is being paid by that festival. Why do you want to cut the line and not pay and take out 3 hours of my time, of my working time, to get feedback, to get me to say, no, you shouldn't submit. I feel it's extremely unfair to me and to all the others. So please register if you want to submit the film. Then it's your choice whether you want to submit that infamous 3 hours director's cut, or if you want to wait a little bit more, sit down and think seriously whether to lock the film at 3 hours or if there is room for improvement. Because again, you only have one shot. And by the way, regarding to the deadline issue, the piece of advice that I give to everyone in general, regardless of this specific issue that we are talking to Indian or non-resident Indian filmmakers, I strongly suggest not to submit rough cuts, work in progress versions at the last minute. It's never a wise choice. And I give you a very clear example. A few days ago, I was corresponding with a filmmaker about his latest film, and I was telling him, your film, I feel your film has a chance in Berlin. You should submit to Berlin. Have you submitted to Berlin? And he wrote back saying, well, Paolo, you know what? We made a big mistake. We learned a hard lesson. Last year, we rushed and sent a work in progress version to Berlin at the last minute, and now we cannot submit anymore. And the film has changed. The film now is locked, and we regret. So yes, please be aware that most A-list festivals have a non-resubmission clause. That means that, there can be exceptions, of course, but usually we are not keen to see a re-edit of the film, of the same film, the next year. It may happen, there may be exceptions, but usually the answer is no. So if you come to the deadline and you have a rough cut, maybe think, it's also for the good of your film. What if your rough cut, by the craziest chance, gets selected, and then you rush to complete a film that needed more time in the edit, needed more time in post-production, and then you present a half-baked film at the festival and your film dies there. Your film, treat your film as your child, give it the right kind of nurturing, bring it to the best of its possibilities and opportunities, and then show it to the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a question about premier status. Is Priya there? Priya M. She had a question about world premiere status, and I think this is an interesting the information you said that Venice only accepts world premieres. But Berlinale actually will take a film; it'll take an international premiere. I mean, Ibaleo played at Berlinale this year, but it had already gone to Pingyao, right? I think so.
Yes, yes, and it also takes European, but those are in different sections. So a festival can have the main competition section will of course only take the world premiere, but then you have panorama and you have other sections. So a filmmaker has to be aware that we see a festival as one thing. But, so we try to say, oh, this is not a Berlin film, or this is not a Cannes film, or this is not a Toronto film. But do you even know how many sections the festival has?
Right.
I mean, it's not like if you have a experimental film, it's not going to be good for Toronto. I mean, Toronto does have an experimental section. So I would say that, don't presume that festivals really well. Also, because in the past 2 or 3 years, there has been huge changes in festivals. As you know, that the festivals are, every festival is different from the other. And every festival wants to be different from the other. And a lot of the vision of the festival usually is driven by the artistic director of the festival. If the festival doesn't already have, like, of course, Venice is an institution and Cannes is an institution. And, the artistic directors are there for long periods of time. And hence you're able to kind of say that you can say it in terms of quality, that of course my film is not of the quality of Venice or Cannes, because you have to have the best, but you still cannot sit here and presume that you will be, I've seen filmmakers who have made decisions like, this year I will submit to main competition in main Cannes, official Cannes. And if I don't get into official Cannes, next year I will submit to Director's Fortnight and then Critics Week. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's in your head, you have made these distinctions, or, they'll say that I'll submit to Berlin this year, then I will submit to, another festival the other year. So your festival strategy is something that's very, very complex. And it's not going to happen just on the basis of, oh, it takes a world premiere, doesn't take a world premiere. Some films, they need not premiere at big festivals. Like, you have Pawan's film, which actually premiered at Mami, Lady of the Lake. It premiered in Mami, went to Dubai, then it went to Berlin.
Right.
And you had Ibaleu that premiered at Pingyao, which was the perfect place for it to premiere, and then get selected for Berlin. You have films that, have premiered at Mami and then gone to Rotterdam, So, but I would say that, yes, of course, by logic, your first view of the film should be a world premiere festival, because suppose you have a real, and this has happened in the past. I remember we had a film in the viewing room, which was, Charles Tesson from Critics Week. This was like many, many years back. He watched the film and he loved it so much. And he wrote to the filmmaker and he said, I really would like to program this for Critics Week. But the film programmer gave it to Dubai Film Festival because they had asked for the film first.
Right.
And didn't know that maybe she should have started at, Critics Week. So you can also, not having any knowledge is also dangerous, do try to understand the system a little, but don't assume you're an expert, and definitely do not gain your knowledge from filmmakers whose films have not traveled anywhere. You know, you're not going to get a
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
but right now, my only worry, Paolo, also I would like to mention here, and when you talk about premieres, and now that premieres are happening online, it's very complicated because
right.
previously a world premiere like could be, in very few festivals in the world can actually ask confidently for a world premiere, and the reason they can do that is literally because when the festival premieres there, it's covered by press all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
A very small festival which does not have a strong press arm should not be asking for a world premiere, because on what basis is it asking for a world premiere? But right now, the difficulty is that even if you say that I'm premiering in a small Indian festival, but it's online, you're technically showing your film to the rest of the world if there's
Unless
no
it's
geo
geo-blocked.
blocking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
honestly.
this is blocked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of small festivals don't know,
Right.
because they are looking out for more and more audiences, and
Right.
they do
Right.
not realize that by not being able to get the right kind of software in place, by not getting the right encryption in place, you are opening the film up to piracy, and you are opening up the film to the possibilities of too many audiences watching it, and hence the film, film festivals have gone into the digital space without
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
realizing that the digital space actually, every film has something called digital rights, which are sellable. I mean, and going into a digital space and showing your film for free might hamper the deal that a VOD platform, a big like a Netflix or an Amazon, might say that, but it's not a digital premiere, you've already
Mm-hmm.
screened the
Mm-hmm.
film.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
technically, I think festivals, I mean, need to speak to big platforms, because for big platforms, a lot of festivals don't matter, because they're just
Mm-hmm.
looking. There are apps on the phone, and they want to acquire your film. So you filmmakers have to be very careful about that, and ask the right questions as to, just not be very grateful, oh, my film has made it to a festival, so show it. you know
Yeah,
um
I mean, Deepti,
it's
you're saying a lot of very important things that are quite relevant even for incidents that I experienced myself in regard to this fact of, submissions. Do I submit to Venice and then wait for Venice to answer, and then I submit to Berlin? I have an interesting story from last year, which is a little bit heartbreaking. So, just to make it concrete, to give you, solid facts. Uh, Last year, there was this short film from India that, Deepti, you've seen it too. You didn't like it, but we have different views on that film. But this short film, we received it for Venice, and me and my colleague was in charge of the short films. We liked it very much, and it was like a film that would have been selected. At a certain moment, my colleague, I don't remember how it happened, but my colleague found out, or we sent the usual email to the filmmakers to ask, is the film retaining a world premiere status? And they told us, or we found out, that the film had just premiered at I don't remember, at what was it called? At a festival in New York or in New Jersey, I don't know, somewhere in the US that I wouldn't know of. And I was like, what? You've submitted to Venice and you're premiering somewhere in the US with an Indian film. And you haven't waited for our answer. And the answer of the producer was, oh, well, you know what? We had submitted to Cannes and we were rejected, and we were so disappointed that we didn't believe in the film anymore. And we took this invitation, and I was like shocked. Come on, I mean, at least when you submit to a festival like Venice, wait for the rejection letter before you feel that you are rejected. Because exactly because of the huge amount of films that we receive, uh, we cannot tell each and every film at every moment, oh, you're in the short list or not. So very practically, yes, first of all, send your film to the festivals, the important festivals that are happening at that time of the year when your film is completed, especially in the fall. You have Venice, you have Toronto, Locarno, New York, Busan, Miami, whatever. Send out your film to the festivals you think, oh, this could be I would be fine with premiering there. Of course, my priority maybe is Cannes, maybe it's Venice, but then why not go into some other festival? Because as Deepti was mentioning earlier, sometimes premiering at one of these other festivals can pave the way for a very interesting career. You premiere in Pinyao, but then you still manage to go to Berlin.
Berlin, yes.
So, because, and I'm saying this because this can also be a very interesting tool for you to ask for feedback to the other festivals. Because if this filmmaker that I was mentioning earlier was a little bit more experienced, he or she would have taken the invitation from this New Jersey Film Festival or whatever it was, and write to Venice and say, hey guys, we got an invitation from this festival. Is my film of interest for you? Are you still considering it? This would have been the right way to proceed. And then we would have said, yes, we are interested. Please keep the film, at least keep the film for us for the moment. Maybe we could have not said we are selecting the film, but we would have told the filmmaker, don't waste your, by the way, in that case, that film lost the world premiere and the international premiere status at once, meaning that its chances to be presented to relevant festivals afterwards were completely gone. So this was an example of how you have to strategize. Now I forgot, Deepti was mentioning something else that was very important.
You know, Paolo, there was a question that was asked by Priya.
Sure.
Exactly. I was going to bring in, but you answered her question that, you know, if they've submitted a film to you and suddenly another festival has already accepted it, it's important for them, the filmmakers, to inform you that the film has already been accepted, because then, you know, just keep it all clean and open there.
I usually give the example of, you know, students applying to American colleges for admissions. And I'm like, you know, would you really this year say that I will apply to Harvard and Columbia and, you know, only the Ivy Leagues, and then wait for another year before you apply to the next ones? Or are you going to apply to all and then see your chances and then make the selection? You know, it's almost the same strategy. You have 1 year after your film is made, 1.5 year max to go into festivals. And there are hundreds of festivals around the world. Always remember, when you apply and when you're selected, the festival has to inform you that you're selected and invite your film. But in case you can apply to several festivals at once, but if you get a selection, tell every festival that you have applied to that this, you know, I have a selection from this festival. What do you think? You know, and mostly like the festivals, like who know, like for example, if you're applying to Berlin and Cannes together, and Cannes has already told you that, you know, we want you in, and then you inform Berlin, Berlin will, even if the film has not yet been watched, it will put on, you know, they will watch it immediately and they will give you a decision, because it's not like the festivals don't want you to do well. I mean, there is something that all programmers shared, which is a love of films, and everyone wants talent to shine. So we are not going to punish a filmmaker. We will be at that point where a decision is required. I think all of us get together with the idea of helping or making it clear to the filmmaker, you know. So if the Berlin will be gracious enough to say that, you know, this year we've already made our selection, and you have to be realistic. I mean, Paolo saying that, you know, really taking 2 films and 3 films from India is the most the region can expect in Venice, you know. So in case Berlin, you know, might as well, you know, Berlin does take a lot of Indian films, but it could say that we actually have made our selections already, because you have to realize that you might be an independent filmmaker submitting, but there are sales agents, you know, and sales agents know festival strategy so well. They understand festivals so well. And if there is a sales agent who has a great portfolio, who has consistently shown that they have good films, you know, they would have submitted way before your film would have come in. The talks would have started way before. And sometimes the film almost, you know, the slots are almost done, though you always keep something open. So I would say that approach it like it is the most precious year, and you have to try all your chances, because after that you have to move on to other platforms, theatrical release. And
I wanted to just quickly add one detail to this whole issue about the, you know, concurrent submissions, because I realized that something that newcomers don't understand, it's a very simple, banal thing, But you know, when you receive a festival invitation, it says, oh, it's strictly confidential. It doesn't mean that you cannot share that information with anybody else in the world. It means that you don't have to shout it out to the press or on your Facebook wall. You can share that information. You have to share that information with the other festivals you have applied to. I mean, the ones that are at a higher level, because you want to get into those. And if you're talking about a feature film, you also have to share this information with people in the industry who can help you maximize the opportunities that the premiere in Venice can give you. In that sense, Deepti was mentioning the sales agents. Okay, I got my wonderful letter of invitation from Venice or Cannes, and I still don't have a sales agent. Now that letter, I bring it to these people who can help me in my journey from there onward, because I may not be able to manage myself the whole circulation of the film in the festival world, the festival circuit, and then to sell it. So these people may be the ones who can help you. And that letter will be the tool for you to convince them to watch the film, because they want to have films in Cannes or Venice. Right. And then maybe, and then again, not show it to just one, and the first one, it's always the same. It's always the same. The first sales agent tells you, your film is wonderful, I want it. Go to the others and tell them, oh, there is someone else who showed interest. What about you? So the strategy repeats itself.
Right. Yeah. There were actually a couple of questions on sales agents. Is Alicia there? Alicia B, maybe she can come in and ask the question. Vishesh, do you know if Alicia is there, or I'll ask her question because her...
Hi.
Hi, Alicia.
Hello.
Let's hear your question about the sales agents. Yeah.
Hi. I was just curious, how does an indie film kind of find sales agents? Like if we do get, like you said, get accepted into a festival, a big name festival, where should we go to look for those sales agents prior?
Well, sales agents, definitely you should be visiting markets, you know, because sales is something that, like I said, that you have to, sales agents are people who are going to put their strength behind your film. They will choose your film for their catalog. It's not like if you approach a sales agent, they will take your film. Your film has to make sense within their, catalog. And because they are selling your film and they have a certain kind of image in the market already. Like if you're making a genre film, then, you would rather be in the catalog of sales agents that look at genre festivals and have other genre films from other countries and have a proper, network with distribution and audiences. Because the guys who are sales agents are the ones who actually travel to festivals. They understand festivals in a very different way. They understand festivals in the business aspect of it. They can understand whether it translates into, actually sales for the region. And it's a very long process. So when you are speaking to a sales agent, you usually are giving your rights of your film for around 10 years at least, because film sales are a long term. So it's important to know your sales agent, just like you would know your producer. It's a relationship of trust. It's a relationship of communication. It's a relationship that could be open to misunderstandings if the communication, but they're also people who come from different regions, because if you're an American film and you want to sell in Europe or the rest of the world, it makes more sense to have a sales agent based in Paris, rather than America trying to sell to the rest of the world. So, you are speaking to someone from a completely different culture, and it would make more sense to have a one-to-one connect and actually meet the person, because you are trusting the person with your film, and then that person's going to make decisions based on, and you have to trust the decisions that person makes, because they will know the price point at which to sell your film, how much money needs to come back to you. And I would say that do some research on for filmmakers who are just starting out and don't understand sales, because I think it's so unfair for an independent filmmaker to have to direct their film, find the funds, and then know how to sell the film as well. It's too much. I mean, how are they? So which is why you need collaborators and some really good directors. If you see some, directors who have now into the 8th or 10th film and are showing at Cannes or Berlin or Venice regularly, you notice a pattern that they usually have similar producers and they're stuck to the same sales agents, because it is a relationship of long-term trust, because the sales agent can also manage to get you interest for funding for your next film. Maybe they can become part producers in the journey of your film. So I think you need to research the past, go to the website of the sales agent, go and see their catalog, try to understand that can you see your film in that catalog of films. Can you do you think that if you feel close to another filmmaker in terms of your filmmaking style, find out who is the sales agent of that filmmaker. How is it that you heard of that filmmaker? Because that filmmaker came to a festival, thanks to the sales agent, maybe. So maybe that, so you can write to them. Online markets, you can ask for a meeting, and then, but it has to be at a market.
Yeah, so you've mentioned markets, and I think I'm a bit green to all of this. So could you kind of explain what you mean by like online markets and these markets?
Yeah. So I'll give you the example of Cannes. So Cannes has one of the largest markets in the world called Marché du Film. And when this year the festival didn't take place, but the market took place. And when you go to Cannes, and I think that it becomes very clear when you actually visit the festival to understand the scale of the festival versus the market and how the market merges into the festival. So once you, as a filmmaker who wants to be at festivals, I think attending the festivals, if you even go to one big A-list festival, a lot of things make sense to you. A lot of it's incredible learning in that 1 or 2 weeks when you're there, and to understand how the whole ecosystem works. So sales agents usually have stalls at markets or booths at markets, and they're looking out for buyers of films, but they're also open to meeting filmmakers who come and speak to them. So it would be like any kind of an expo, if you have anything to sell and you have a world expo, you're going out there, something like that.
I'm sorry for stepping in. We have time for just about 2 more questions probably. Nikhil, is Nikhil here? Nikhil has a question about the film market.
Yeah, hey Aseem, how's it going?
Nikhil, hi. Yeah, go ahead, Nikhil, ask your question quickly. Yeah, from
this question for Deepti. Thank you folks for doing this. So I'm planning to register for the Film Bazaar, Deepti. I'm aware of your viewing room and I've been in touch with your team about that. But I have a new English language genre short film in post-production. So if a sale or a theatrical, if a sale or like a festival programming for the film is my goal, what do you think are some opportunities or ways for me to tap into or things to target at the Bazaar in Jan?
Well, I would say like the Bazaar is really a platform, for people to meet. And we do send out invitations to festival directors and programmers of known film festivals, but it is also open to registrations from outside. So we never know really till the end of the Bazaar who has registered and who hasn't. But we have something called the market guide, and the market guide gives you information of all the delegates. One good thing about registering early is that you will receive a link on the market to the market guide. You will get to know people who are registering. And, they will say that they are from this festival or from the genre festival. And then you can set up meetings with them. Using if it was happening in a physical space, then, there would be cocktails in the evening and you meet them and you decide on a meeting time. But usually it's important to be prepared for the Bazaar because it's such a concentrated time span and there are only that many people you can meet. I mean, unlike maybe in a physical place where one person's talking and 10 people can surround them, here it's going to be more one-on-one. So I would say that keep your eyes open. And also you can do another thing is that if you're very proactive and you have already registered to the Bazaar and you are a filmmaker, you can write to us and say, you know what, I've done my research on the net or on Senando, because Senando is another big database. And you can say that, can you please invite these 5 people to be part of the Bazaar, because they seem like, they would really like my film. And NFDC might just consider and send them the links and say that, okay, we have content that you would like to see. And then they come in and you have the viewing room where we have designed the way, pitches will happen, but we are also excited to see how the online version will pan out. But we studied a few online versions and we've understood that it's basically requests being sent for a meeting, but everyone's giving their time to the projects for those many days.
There was a question for Deepti from Omar. I know, Deepti, that is Omar here?
Yeah, can you see me?
Vishesh will open you up. Deepti, I know that you, in the Film Bazaar, you've had South Asian projects from Bangladesh, from Nepal, Sri Lanka also. Omar had a question about Pakistani projects. Omar?
Hi, Deepti.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, obviously we have such a challenging kind of geopolitical situation between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
And yet it's so sad because our cinematic links are so long-standing and deep.
Yes.
What challenges have you faced in terms of programming, whether it's films or projects? What are the ratios?
Well, I haven't really faced any, challenges as such, because people who, one of the good things about Film Bazaar is that it's a B2B market, and it's not really directly going to audiences who are the ones who actually react to things. I mean, professionals understand other professionals and we know the region. So I've also worked with Locarno for South Asia for 3 years. So I'm aware of, directors from Pakistan and producers from Pakistan. We've had projects at Film Bazaar from Pakistan. We've had filmmakers who have come here. Yes, the problem that is faced is when they want to come physically and apply for the visa. That is something beyond the control of, because that doesn't come within the control of the institution. Usually, that is for any festival in the world, because visa is handled by, but in terms of project selection, I don't think viewing room is a pay and view project. So if you have a project, you can pay and it is going to be in the viewing room. There is no real, there has never been any rejection of projects in the viewing room. What I do usually is not for the short films, but for the features, I watch the features and I make a selection called Film Bazaar Recommends. That is just that I recommend a few projects, but the rest are not rejected. They're open to pitch and they can promote their projects as well. So there haven't been, I think, any such, and none of the films go through censorship as well, because it's a film market. So I think if there has been anything, it has been from a place of doubt of whether we should submit or whether we shouldn't submit from filmmakers from Pakistan maybe. And but projects which have been submitted have been selected or not selected based on the quality of the projects. I don't do co-production, I do viewing room, and I can confidently say that there has never been a rejection of a film from viewing room or work in progress lab.
Excellent. I have room for just one very quick question. Paolo can answer that. Priya, are you there? Priya M? Because she had lots of questions, but there was this one question she had asked about, a film that's emerging from the Indian diaspora in the US. Is that considered an Indian film or would that be considered an American film? Is Priya there?
Yeah, I'm here. Like every time, like I just was a second late in getting unmuted. So I apologize for that. But yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Priya, I've already asked your question. So Paolo, you want to go ahead?
I think Paolo would be better to actually answer that question.
Well, it's an interesting question, and it totally makes sense. And this obviously applies also to a Pakistani diaspora filmmaker or Bangladeshi diaspora filmmaker. It really, unless you have a direct contact with someone, meaning that, okay, you contact Deepti, you contact me and say, well, yes, I have this film and I need an answer about this. Usually the way the film will be processed depends on the way you complete the form, meaning that if you write down your country of production as United States, then it will go a certain way. And if you write India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, it will go another way. That, of course, The person who will see it will realize, oh, it's registered as an Indian film, but it's made in the United States. But then it is not something that, I mean, personally, if it happens to me that I see an Indian film that is set in South Africa, it could be possible, or in the US, I still watch it as a film. Ultimately, I mean, of course, all the cultural and industry specificities that we mentioned earlier are relevant, but ultimately what we look for is quality filmmaking. So if a film is good and it's made within the Indian community in Durban, South Africa, or New York, US, so it's going to be a good film regardless, and it stands the same chances of any other good film. So I hope this answers the question, because it's just a formality, I would say, and I do understand that then it brings in the question of the identity of the film, which is very interesting in such cases. But ultimately, it's just this matter of the quality. It may affect the process, but not the final evaluation.
Great, thank you very much. You know, we have many other questions coming in, and actually what was really good was in the conversation itself, some of the stuff that Paolo and Deepti referred to were in the question forms, including an earlier question Priya had asked. This has been really very informative for me. I mean, you know, I think like I can run a film festival and I understand that, but this is really fascinating. I needed to thank a few people, of course, Kalakars for organizing this. Really appreciate that. I was told that it should be only 1 hour, but we've gone beyond 1.5 hours. And I think between Deepti and Paolo talking and my listening and the questions coming, we could go on even longer. Bhavani Rao from South Asians in Entertainment. So thank you for your support for Kalakars. And Deepti, thank you for waking up really very early. Paolo, thank you for staying awake. So really, really appreciate that. I'm sure there'll be more questions people will have, but they'll somehow figure out how to reach you. The Film Bazaar is still accepting submissions, right, Deepti?
It's actually, the deadline's done, but you know, you can send in a request and we shall consider.
This is another interesting point. There are but yes, let me add this final takeaway. There are deadlines, but you can ask questions. And oftentimes, I mean, especially in the case of Venice, but even Cannes, Director's Fortnight, the deadline usually is the deadline for registration. And then you still have some extra time to actually submit the film. So please register by deadline. If you think that your film will be ready 1 week later, or maybe even 2 weeks later, you can drop a line to the festivals. I mean, asking never hurts. Can I still register the film? And maybe you can wait to pay.
You've opened the Pandora's box now. I used to somehow manage to get films by deadline, and now
but this is actually even the Kazan, the Director's Fortnight regulation. You can register the film by March 31st, and then you can submit by April 15th. So it's like this. I mean, it's not stated openly in Venice, but it's like that. Usually the deadline for registration is very early, and you're surprised. How can I make it? It's so close to Cannes, actually, and it doesn't make sense for us either. But it's a kind of a bureaucratic thing, and we do accept films a little bit later as well. But the important thing is to complete registration. Sorry, Deepti, but
and having said that, the best time to register is during the early bird deadline.
Right. All right, guys, thank you very much. I just wanted to quickly say on behalf of the New York Indian Film Festival that I program, and Giri is also there, we were delayed in asking for submissions because of the pandemic, and we actually ended up doing an online festival this year in July, August. The submission information will be sent out. The press release should be out later this week. We are hoping that theaters in New York will open and we will be able to do a physical festival, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I don't know where we are going with this pandemic. Things are looking worse and worse in the US, and we might even have to do another virtual festival, which I think is not a bad idea, because, you know, one of the good things I learned about doing, in the past, I used to show films in Manhattan, and people from Texas would say, I wish we could come and see your films. We opened up the world basically. Most filmmakers were able to reach audiences across the US, in Canada, and some were able to reach India also. So, and even as a journalist, when I look at films, it's been great to see these virtual festivals where you can be sitting in one part of the world and you can see the films being shown somewhere else. But be patient, and there's so much information that Paolo and Deepti have given to us. So digest that, and just be mindful of the fact that, Deepti and her team, and Paolo and his team, and the work I do also, we're human beings also. We love helping new filmmakers. We love looking at new films. We love discovering new cinema, but we also have our limits. So thank you. Thank you, Vishesh.
Thank you so much, Aseem.
Thank you, Giri. And I'm so glad, I'm so glad that we brought both. And because Paolo and Deepti, you both work together, I think it even worked better to have you both sort of share ideas and things like that. So good evening, good night to New Yorkers and to people in Italy and Europe. And Deepti, my day is just starting.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Thanks so much, Aseem.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.